Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is April 20th, 2025, and it is Easter Sunday. He is risen. Today is day 562 since October 7th of 2023. Mark chapter 16, verse 6 says, "Do not be afraid, for the man that you are looking for, Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified, he is risen. He is not here." That's what Christians around the world are remembering today, or this Sunday, whatever time zone you're in. May we remember the truth and glory of Christ's resurrection as we daily pray and work toward an end to the ongoing atrocities in Gaza and all of the violence in the Middle East against Palestinians, Israelis, people in Yemen, South Lebanon, wherever there are people are suffering and violence is committed. Might the resurrection of Christ remind us that death is not the end of the story. And yet we desire for earth to be reflective of the kingdom of God. So we work to end violence. We work towards justice. We work towards human rights and equality, where the Imago Dei in all people would be respected. I wanted to give just a few pieces of news before I share a bit of a devotional this morning. Progress has been made on Iran talks, according to the United States, who met over this weekend. The U.S. reported good progress. The talks happened in Rome. Tehran says that Iran and the U.S. are starting to design a framework for a nuclear deal. All that while in Israel, there were reports of a possible attack, by Israel on Iran. But the third round of negotiations are set to be held in Oman next week between the U.S. and Iran. That's according to the Iranian foreign minister. He said that he and Trump's envoy Witkoff managed to reach a better understanding on a series of principles and the goal. A summary update of what's been happening in Gaza and where things stand today. Since October 7th of 2023, it's believed that at least 62,000 people have been killed. The actual numbers from the Ministry of Health are 51,065 as of yesterday. Over 18,000 children and 12,400 women have been killed. There's an estimated 11,000 people still underneath the rubble. Gaza faces an unparalleled humanitarian crisis. The toll on the population, infrastructure, and environment is devastating. There are at least 2,172 families that have been entirely wiped out, and 5,070 families now only have one surviving member. Additionally, 281 babies were born and killed during the conflict. 1,402 medical workers, 2,011 journalists, 748 aid and civil defense workers have been killed, over 116,500 people injured, and more than 4,700 amputations reported. We know that at least 39,000 children have lost one or both of their parents, and there are 350,000 reported cases of chronic illnesses. And the patients are at severe risk due to the shortage of medical supplies and treatment facilities. There's a dire shortage of clean water because of the destruction of water treatment plants, wells, distribution mechanisms, and the inability to be able to repair them, often because of the obstruction by the Israeli military. Thousands of water wells have been damaged or destroyed. All of this worsens the already critical humanitarian crisis. There are 2.1 million infectious diseases in Gaza that include diarrhea and skin infections. These are reportedly because of overcrowding and inadequate sanitation. We know that at least 13,000 students and 800 educators have been killed, and 785,000 students are unable to attend school because of the destruction of shelters and schools. 88% of the entire infrastructure of Gaza has been destroyed. I could go on and on with the details, but hearing the words of Jesus, my God, why have you forsaken me?" must be on the lips of many who are suffering such atrocities. I'm currently in Jordan, and I gave a bit of an update yesterday on Holy Saturday and worship in Jerusalem, which was such an incredible experience to participate as a special guest of the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate in Jerusalem. And today, the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate put out a powerful statement in response to the attacks and the limitations of worship by the military police. CMEP will be putting out a statement shortly too, and I would encourage you to read them. The Holy Fire service was so exclusive that even the nuncio of the Holy See, that's Vatican's ambassador to the Palestinians, was not allowed into the Old City to be able to worship. And His Holiness Pope Francis responded. Pope Francis made an Easter appearance and deplored rising world anti-Semitism and the deaths in Gaza. Emerging from convalescence, the pontiff, who missed most Holy Week events, sat in a wheelchair on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, as is traditional, and instead, this year it was read by the Archbishop. I also witnessed firsthand when I was in the Old City of Jerusalem that Jewish worshipers in the city are privileged more than Muslims and Christians and internationals. This happened throughout the week of Pesach, Passover, and it was reported on Thursday that the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound witnessed an unprecedented incursion. 2,258 settlers went to the Haram al-Sharif for the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. This is the largest number since 1967. As we think about Jerusalem, I wanted to share the words of the patriarch who, in the statement, this is the Patriarchate of the Greek Orthodox, they quoted Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, that says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." The Patriarchate of Jerusalem, the Orthodox Patriarchate, emphatically condemns the egregious violations that desecrated the sanctity of Jerusalem yesterday, particularly in the Old City and around the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, during the celebration of the Blessed Holy Fire. Israeli police forces transformed the sacred city into a militarized zone, erecting barriers, obstructing the faithful from reaching their churches, and perpetuating assaults against scouts and worshipers, both locals and pilgrims from around the world. These reprehensible actions, which deprived thousands of believers of their divine right to prayer and worship, stands in direct contradiction to Jerusalem's eternal vocation as a city of peace for the children of God. Mark chapter 11, verse 17 says, "As our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be the glory, declared, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations." In the midst of this affliction, we lift our hearts to the risen Lord, imploring His just peace to reign over the Holy Land, for the shadow of injustice to be lifted from His city, and for the machinery of war to fall silent in the afflicted land of Gaza. May the light of the resurrection shine once more upon the peoples of our region, bearing witness to the triumph of justice, hope, and freedom. And I wanted to share with you today, after that update of what's been happening, this was a devotional I wrote actually several weeks ago. This was during the phase 1 of the ceasefire agreement before it fell apart between Israel and Hamas. And, you know, I felt even then that peace in the negotiations were hanging by a thread. And this was written during a time when we were celebrating that bombs were no longer being dropped daily on Gaza, that the hostages and prisoner exchanges were moving forward. As of yet, you know, I wrote that there would be no assurances that ceasefire would hold or that things would progress into phase 2. The stalemate between Hezbollah and Israel has continued. The ceasefire, they are being extended, and yet breaches occur on a regular basis. And so, I wrote this again while fighting in Gaza had subsided, but many people called the regular incursions and settlement attacks in the occupied West Bank the silent war against the West Bank. So these were the words that are written in the devotional book from the Gaza ceasefire pilgrimage for this Lenten season and this Easter Sunday. Oh, how we desperately need the good news of Easter Sunday. We need to be reminded that death and violence are not the end of the story, and they do not win the day. The world, including the United States and the Middle East, most needs the message of Easter in these challenging moments. On the morning of the resurrection, the disciples and followers of Jesus must have been overcome by sorrow and despair. Only a couple of days before, Christ had been crucified in the humiliation of the cross. And instead of triumphing over death, he had cried out to God, "Why, oh, why have you forsaken me?" Imagine the surprise of the women then when they went to the tomb and they found it empty. The man at the tomb informed them, "Do not be afraid. The man you are looking for, Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified, he has risen. He is not here." Imagine the surprise of the disciples when the women returned and told them the news. And these days, after more than a year of war in the Middle East with such uncertainty and discord in the U.S., we need to hear some surprisingly good news. The resurrection story reminds us that whatever we see in the immediate moment does not contain the whole picture, but rather God's purposes prevail, and they overcome darkness and evil in the world. As we say regularly, John chapter 1, verse 5, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. This past year, I've seen glimpses of light shining in darkness as we sought and diligently called for a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire to end the bombardment of Gaza and the ongoing atrocities there. The horrors of October 7th and the ongoing ethnic cleansing of Gaza have wrought trauma, overwhelming trauma, and atrocities. And we sought a permanent end to all violence, and we've daily called for the release of hostages and Palestinian prisoners held unjustly. There is so much bad news coming out of Gaza and other parts of the Middle East each and every day. In January 2024 in Jerusalem, we had the privilege to launch the global movement of the Gaza ceasefire pilgrimages, alongside of internationals and Palestinians. And honestly, I had no idea if any groups would walk. Maybe one or two was our hope. Walking in prayer as a means of calling an awareness to the realities on the ground and advocating for just and lasting solutions to the decades of occupation and oppression. Our hope was that maybe a few communities would participate in the Gaza ceasefire pilgrimages. But months later, I wept alongside other organizers as we learned that thousands and thousands and thousands of people have walked together. Sometimes monthly, sometimes every week, sometimes during Lent last year, sometimes during Lent this year, side by side with Christians and people of other faith traditions, Jews and Muslims, calling for an end to war, to violence, to ethnic cleansing, and to genocide. The atrocities in Gaza have demanded the world's attention. When I wrote this, the death toll was 47,000 Palestinians. You heard the numbers from today. Not only did numerous groups in the U.S. and around the world take up the mantle of the pilgrimages, but there were walks in 7 continents, all of the continents of the world, and more than 20 countries. The walk in Cape Town, South Africa, included people side by side for more than a mile. People for more than a mile. Catholic nuns unable to walk alongside of their sisters in their community who were walking a mile a day during Lent on behalf of Gaza, the distance of the Strip. The people who could not walk, these sisters, these nuns who were impaired in their physical body, they said that they walked in their minds during the time that it would take to walk each mile, traveling on a pilgrimage for peace, even when their bodies were unable to make the journey. The world has come together even in this small way. This is a glimpse of resurrection living, holding on to hope when it still seems like war, violence, death, and destruction are prevailing. He is risen. The good news teaches us the faithfulness of God and reminds us to continue to have hope for the world, towards Gaza, all of Palestine, all of Israel, and all of the Middle East. There are many, many verses that come to mind, but one of them that you know I've carried with me since October 7th of 2023 is from Romans chapter 12, verses 10 through 12 that say, "Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never lack in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer." Christ shows us that the greatest love we might have is Christ showed us that the greatest love that exists is the love that he exemplified for us by carrying the sins of the world on the cross. His death and resurrection remind us to have hope. As the current ceasefire existed between Hamas and Israel, we had hope, and we still have it even today. We will zealously and diligently continue to pursue justice and peace. May our efforts be compelled by love, joyful in hope, patient in our challenges, and faithful in our prayers as we daily continue in our efforts. In the name of Christ, amen.